Welcome to GBS. We deliver complete and concise summaries of the greatest books carefully selected. By the end of each video, you'll gain a clear understanding of the book's main ideas and key insights, just as if you've read the entire book yourself. Subscribe now and join me in exploring 100 great books in 1 year. Today, we're exploring Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. As the title suggests, this book delves into the ways we think. In our daily lives, we spend a significant amount of time making decisions and judgments. Yet, many of us don't realize that our thoughts are often far less rational than we believe. Kahneman's book sheds light on the fundamental workings of our brain, helping us make wiser choices. The author, Daniel Kahneman, is a professor at Princeton University and a Nobel laureate in economics, which might seem surprising since he is a psychologist by training. His groundbreaking research transcends psychology, profoundly influencing the field of economics by challenging the traditional assumption that humans are always rational decision makers. For instance, imagine you're choosing between two sets of dinnerware, one with 5 intact plates and another with 6 plates, one of which is broken. Rationally, both should be priced the same, as the broken plate shouldn't affect the value. However, most people prefer the first set and are willing to pay more for it, simply because the broken plate feels bothersome. This mirrors real-world decisions, like avoiding products with minor flaws or choosing simpler options to avoid discomfort, highlighting how human decisions often defy logic, a central theme of Kahneman's work. His ideas have reshaped how we understand economic behavior, earning, thinking fast and slow comparisons to landmark theories like Darwin's theory of evolution or Copernicus's heliocentric model. In this book, Kahneman introduces us to the two systems that govern how we think, explains why our intuition is flawed, and offers practical ways to avoid these pitfalls. Today, we'll follow the structure of the book to explore 4 key aspects. 1. What are the two systems of thinking, fast and slow? 2. How do these systems lead to intuitive errors? 3. How can we counteract these errors to make rational decisions? 4. How can understanding these systems enrich our lives? Let's dive into the first question. What are fast and slow thinking? Kahneman explains that our brain operates using two systems, which he calls System 1 and System 2. System 1, or fast thinking, works automatically and effortlessly. It's responsible for instant reactions like recognizing a friend's face in a crowd or dodging a ball flying toward you. It relies on intuition and past experience, and it's always on. System 2, or slow thinking, is deliberate and effortful. It comes into play when solving complex problems or making careful decisions, like calculating a tip or analyzing a tricky question. This system requires focus and consumes more mental energy. To illustrate the interplay between these systems, consider this simple question. If a bat and a ball cost $1.10 and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Your instinctive answer might be $1. However, upon careful calculation, you'll realize the ball costs 0.5 cents and the bat costs $1.05. The initial incorrect answer is an example of System 1 at work, while System 2 is needed to catch the mistake and find the right solution. Errors like this matter because they reveal how quickly System 1 can mislead us in everyday decision-making, especially when accuracy is crucial. Interestingly, while we value rationality, System 1 dominates most of our daily decisions. Why? Because thinking deeply consumes significant energy, and our brains prefer to conserve resources. System 1 helps us navigate life efficiently, automating routine tasks like brushing our teeth or navigating familiar routes. However, this reliance on System 1 also explains why humans often act irrationally. Quick judgments, while energy-saving, are prone to biases and errors. For example, when focusing intently on a task, such as counting passes in a basketball game, we may fail to notice glaringly obvious events, like someone in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. This phenomenon, known as inattentional blindness, demonstrates the limits of System 2 when overwhelmed. Imagine this scenario. You're out for a leisurely walk when your boss suddenly calls and asks what you plan to say in tomorrow's big meeting. Instinctively, you slow your pace, perhaps even stopping entirely. Why? Because walking briskly would distract you from focusing on the question. Even if you hand the task over to System 2, a lack of mental energy might cause it to disengage, leaving System 1 in charge. And System 1, as we'll see, isn't great at handling complex problems. Let's dive into the second major question. What negative effects can fast thinking have? Specifically, what cognitive traps can our brain's operating modes lead us into? The first trap is the cognitive ease trap. This occurs when a person is in a relaxed mental state where System 2 isn't activated. In such moments, we tend to feel positive and trusting toward whatever is in front of us. For example, imagine meeting a colleague with a harsh and intimidating appearance. Initially, you might feel uneasy, but as you interact with them over time, you might find their personality agreeable, and even their appearance becomes less off-putting. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect, the tendency to develop a liking for things simply because we're repeatedly exposed to them. Here's another example. Consider the statement, "When people work together, nothing is impossible." It's clear, concise, and easy to understand. Now compare it with a more complex phrasing of the same idea. The simpler version is far more persuasive because it doesn't strain our cognitive resources. This ease makes us more susceptible to errors in judgment, such as quickly believing misleading news headlines simply because they're written in an accessible style, or trusting overly simplistic explanations of complex issues. Cognitive ease can lead to impulsive actions, like purchasing something solely because the advertisement looks appealing, dismissing a valuable business report because the text is blurry, or investing in a high-risk stock simply because a trusted friend recommended it. These decisions, made without due diligence, can result in significant losses. Additionally, cognitive ease can cause us to dismiss rare events after experiencing them once. For instance, Kahneman recounts running into an old friend, John, during a vacation. The encounter was a delightful surprise. However, when he bumped into John again at the movies 2 weeks later, the surprise was gone. His brain had normalized the event, creating the illusion that seeing John during outings was routine. This kind of mental shortcut can make us underestimate risks in similar scenarios. During such moments of cognitive ease, System 2 becomes even lazier than usual, which is why we need to remain vigilant. Next, let's explore the substitution trap. System 1 is not adept at solving complex problems, but instead of passing the problem to System 2, it often substitutes a simpler question and uses that answer as a stand-in for the original. For example, if asked, "Is this person a good individual?" one might struggle to judge objectively. Instead, the question gets replaced with, "Is this person nice to me?" a much easier question to answer. Or imagine being asked, "How much would you donate to save dolphins?" You might not have a specific figure in mind, but if you think about how upset you feel imagining dolphins being hunted, you may base your donation on that emotion. This substitution of a simple emotional reaction for a complex evaluation is a hallmark of System 1. This trap also leads to various psychological biases, with stereotyping being one of the most prominent. Stereotyping occurs when we use a limited trait to represent the whole. For instance, seeing someone with many tattoos might lead to the assumption that they aren't academically inclined. Similarly, regional stereotypes, like assuming people from a certain place are particularly frugal or have a temper, are nothing more than mental shortcuts created by System 1. In essence, stereotyping is System 1 taking a shortcut, replacing the effort of thoroughly understanding someone with the ease of assigning a label. Another bias stemming from substitution is the halo effect. This is when a strong positive impression in one area clouds our judgment of a person's overall capabilities. For example, we might assume someone is an excellent manager simply because they gave a brilliant presentation. Or we might make a significant investment decision based on a well-written report without considering that we lack sufficient information. Overall, the substitution trap often leads us to overgeneralize, using personal impressions or limited experiences as a substitute for objective analysis. This can result in flawed judgments and missed opportunities. The third cognitive trap described in the book is the anchoring trap. Here, anchor refers to how our judgments are influenced by an initial reference point, much like how a ship's anchor fixes its position. Let me explain with an example. Kahneman conducted an experiment using a rigged number wheel labeled 1 to 100. When spun, it would only land on either 10 or 65. After spinning, participants were asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. Those who spun a 10 gave an average guess of 25%, while those who spun a 65 guessed 45%. Clearly, the spin influenced their responses. This is anchoring in action. Anchoring frequently impacts our everyday decisions. Take two porridge shops, for instance. Both have similar customer traffic, but one consistently outperforms the other in sales. The difference? At the better performing shop, the staff ask, "Would you like 1 egg or 2 with your porridge?" At the other shop, they ask, "Would you like to add an egg?" The first question nudges customers to think about quantity, resulting in higher egg sales. Subtle anchoring like this can significantly influence outcomes. Another example is how products are priced. A mid-range product placed between high-end items is more likely to be perceived as worth its higher price tag. Conversely, if it's displayed next to bargain items, it might seem overpriced regardless of its quality. Anchoring even affects personal impressions. Consider how we're mindful of the company we keep, knowing it can influence how others perceive us. This leads us to the final trap, the framing trap, which is an advanced form of anchoring. System 1, as we've discussed, struggles with nuanced evaluation and tends to rely on how information is presented. The same problem framed differently can lead to drastically different decisions. Here's an example. A miser falls into a river, and a passerby shouts, "Give me your hand." The miser doesn't respond. The passerby then changes their phrasing to, "Take my hand." This time, the miser immediately grabs hold. Although the two statements mean the same, the framing influenced the miser's reaction. Similarly, compare these two statements. The surgery has a 90% survival rate versus the surgery has a 10% mortality rate. Though they describe the same reality, the first statement feels more reassuring due to positive framing. This bias is rooted in loss aversion, the tendency to fear losses more than we value equivalent gains. Another example involves two gas stations. Station A sells gas at $6 per gallon, but offers a $1 discount for cash payments. Station B sells gas at $5, but charges an extra $1 for credit card payments. Although the cost is identical, Station A feels more appealing because the discount is framed as a gain, whereas Station B frames the surcharge as a loss. This is because humans are more motivated to avoid losses than to pursue equivalent gains, a concept known as loss aversion. Framing is a powerful tool often exploited in marketing and pricing strategies to encourage impulsive decisions. For instance, in online shopping, you may see free shipping on orders over $50, which feels like a reward, versus a $5 shipping fee for orders below $50, which feels like a penalty. Both approaches influence behavior by leveraging framing effects. These four traps, cognitive ease, substitution, anchoring, and framing, make avoiding intuitive errors a significant challenge. While it's impossible to eliminate these entirely, being aware of them can help us engage System 2 and make more rational decisions, especially when facing high-stakes situations. This brings us to the next part of the book, how to make rational decisions. Kahneman suggests 3 methods, starting with avoiding intuitive traps. To counteract cognitive ease, develop the habit of consulting others and incorporating external perspectives rather than relying solely on personal intuition. For substitution, imagine worst-case scenarios in advance and analyze whether you might be oversimplifying complex issues. To guard against anchoring, assume every number presented during negotiations is an anchor and use System 2 to scrutinize them critically. For framing, you can use the effect to your advantage by creating favorable contexts. For instance, if you have good and bad news, pair them together if the good outweighs the bad, or present them separately if the bad overshadows the good. The second strategy for avoiding irrational decisions is to develop probability-based thinking. Probability-based thinking, as the name suggests, involves making decisions based on the actual likelihood of events rather than relying on subjective intuition. While this concept is easy to understand, it's hard to practice because it often goes against our instincts. For instance, if you see a news report about a plane crash, you might instinctively conclude that trains are safer. However, statistically speaking, the probability of a train accident is actually higher. A rational decision for safety would still favor flying. To develop probability-based thinking, there are two key points to keep in mind. First, don't overemphasize rare events. Instead, ask yourself how likely such events are to occur. For instance, while a lottery jackpot sounds enticing, the actual probability of winning is minuscule. Second, ignore the phenomenon of regression to the mean, which suggests that extreme deviations, whether above or below the average, tend to return to normal levels over time. For example, an athlete who delivers an unusually stellar performance in one game is likely to perform closer to their average in subsequent games. This applies to stock performance, weather changes, and even sports results. It's better to evaluate long-term trends rather than focusing on one or two exceptional outcomes. Another helpful approach to rational decision-making is converting psychological accounts into economic accounts. This is especially relevant for financial decisions. Psychological accounts are imaginary categories created in our minds, while economic accounts reflect actual transactions. Here's an example. A psychologist asked participants whether they would still attend a $200 concert if they lost a $200 phone card on the way. Most said they would. However, when the scenario changed to losing the $200 concert ticket and having to buy a replacement, most participants said they wouldn't go. Yet both situations result in the same $200 loss. The added emotional weight of spending $400 on one concert makes it seem irrational, even though the actual loss is identical. Converting psychological accounts into economic accounts means stripping away emotional biases to focus on cold, hard numbers. For example, in big cities, someone who chooses to take a taxi to work daily instead of buying a car might be seen as extravagant. However, after calculating the costs of fuel, parking, maintenance, and depreciation, they might find that taxis are actually cheaper, safer, and more convenient. This is a rational decision based on economic accounts. In summary, we've discussed 3 methods to avoid irrational decisions: avoiding cognitive traps, adopting probability-based thinking, and converting psychological accounts into economic accounts. But understanding the brain's operating principles isn't just about better decision-making, it can also enhance our overall life experiences. Kahneman discovered that our evaluation of experiences is heavily influenced by 2 factors: the peak moment and the ending. He calls this the peak-end rule, which also shapes future decisions. To illustrate this, Kahneman conducted the famous cold water experiment. Participants immersed their hands in ice-cold water under 3 conditions. In the first, they kept their hand in the water for 60 seconds. In the second, they kept their hand in the water for 60 seconds, followed by 30 seconds of slightly warmer water, easing the discomfort. For the third, participants could repeat either of the first 2 conditions. Surprisingly, 80% chose the second condition with the longer duration because the final stage was less unpleasant. This is how we evaluate life. We weigh peak and ending experiences more heavily than the overall process. Kahneman argues that we have 2 selves: the remembering self, which distorts reality by focusing on highlights, and the experiencing self, which records moment-to-moment sensations but doesn't store them as memories. Our decisions are often guided by the remembering self's narrative. For example, we might dismiss an amazing movie if the ending disappointed us, or label a marriage a failure if it ended in divorce, ignoring the joy it brought at its peak. Similarly, we focus more on life's conclusion than on the journey itself. To enhance life experiences, we can consciously create peak moments within our control. For example, when traveling on a budget, allocate extra resources for the final day to ensure the trip ends on a high note. You could also plan small celebrations for personal achievements, like treating yourself to a special meal after finishing a big project. Additionally, we can recognize when the remembering self dominates and consciously revisit the experiencing self to find comfort in past joys, helping us make better decisions in the present. In conclusion, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman addresses a profound question: why are humans irrational? The book explores this through 4 parts: understanding the brain's dual systems, identifying cognitive traps, applying rational decision-making strategies, and using these principles to enrich our lives. Thank you for watching. I hope it helps you make wiser choices and create more fulfilling experiences.